this is going to be a final video of the FTE engine swap. But in the meantime, let's show you where this rig started. Folks, it's been 3 months since we got the FTE into the 80 series. Now in that time, we've had the privilege of enjoying the 80 series, the old goat, but we've also had our fair share of mishaps. The first one being on the way to camp, our brake line bursts, and the awesome guys at Pioneer 4x4, they made me a custom set of brake lines about 18 months ago for the build. So when I was on the phone to the guy at Pioneer 4x4, I just told him, he knew exactly who I was. He got a fresh set of brake lines, 2 front ones, on the workbench. He made them that night and sent them out the very next day. And bearing in mind, we were almost in the middle of nowhere, and he got them sent to me and delivered to our camp, and we got that repaired. So hats off to the guys at Pioneer 4x4. And if you're looking for some awesome custom brake lines and hoses and things, they are the go-to guys. You can choose all sorts of colors, fittings, and make sure you speak to the guys there because they're so knowledgeable of what they're doing. So thank you very much to you guys. And on the way back from camp, bearing in mind, this is all the same journey and the same trip. So we were just absolutely blessed with all sorts of crazy mishaps. And on the way back, from our awesome holiday, we quickly discovered that the wheel bearings collapsed on the rear passenger side, and subsequently with the wheel bearing collapsed, it's transferred so much heat into the physical hub and the spindle, and that also transferred into the floating axle itself. And with that heat, what I can only assume is that it weakened the internal floating axle. And with obviously the power of the 80 series, we were also towing at the same time. It snapped the axle, the floating axle, and I didn't have anywhere to park or anywhere to safely pull over, so I was forced to drive for another 10-15 minutes. And in that time, you can only imagine the amount of damage that is happening inside the axle. And it doesn't really come apparent until you physically look at the damage inside. And the internal floating axle, obviously spinning at high speed, inevitably fuse welded itself to the inside of the axle housing and subsequently destroying the whole rear axle. So it was a costly error. Probably it is a good lesson that check your wheel bearings, make sure they're greased up, make sure they are serviced before a big trip, especially when you're towing and you're carrying loads of weight. It is so important. And in that time, we got a new axle, we got new brake lines, new brakes, bearings, the whole rear axle is fresh. So I'm going to roll a clip of the damage and the issues that we faced there. So this is what's left of the axle. So we all know, if you own an 80 series, the axle is attached to this faceplate, and it's about 1 meter long. It's supposed to be about that long. So that looks very odd. It's not a clean brake. That to me looks like an axle that's been twisted,
and twisted over time, and eventually it's obviously given way. So the only conclusion I come up with is when we, obviously it was too late when the damage happened, but when on closer inspection now, we did hear, and the symptoms were very loud squealing and stuff, but that was moments before disaster. So I would never have known if the wheel bearings were failing or anything like that until the very last moment. So that was quite frustrating from my point of view. So the conclusion is that the wheel bearings failed, which they have, because when we took the hub off, it was just basically caked in metal filings. All inside here is all metal filings. Absolutely destroyed. It cooked the seals, it cooked everything, so we lost all the diff oil at the same time. So I'm not too sure. I need to get this cleaned up and see what sort of damage is in here. Hopefully not too bad. But if this is a bearing surface, it's going to probably be pitted and damaged, so it's not ideal for bearings. So this might be toast now. So the only thing I can say is that with the bearings failing and destroyed themselves, friction causes heat. Heat is transferred through all metal parts because they all conduct heat, and that heat was transferred into the spindle. So the spindle, this is your spindle where your hub sits on and your wheel bearings. So you've got one needle bearing there, should have another one there. That's the backing, that's obviously welded itself to it. So they transfer the heat into the spindle here, and then into the hub itself that runs there like that. And then that backing plate, which is attached to the axle, all transfer the heat into the axle. That's the only conclusion I come up with. All the heat into there, making this a weak point. And then with the power of the 80 series now, with the FTE engine, the power, it basically twists this axle and just snapped it off. And then what's happened is with the axle braking in this location here, it wasn't a clean brake. It basically turned into molten mush and welded itself inside the spindle and then created this huge bulge here. So basically the whole axle is toast now because I physically can't get that axle out unless I have to cut the spindle off. So yeah, this is incredible amount of damage for something that is easily maintainable. But again, there was no warning signs. My wheels have been fine. There was no squealing, no grinding, no odd noises, and I've been checking and testing these brakes. I took the wheel off before we went on the trip, this specific wheel, and reset the handbrake on this side, and everything was perfectly normal. So, but clearly it wasn't. Sort of behind the hub, I think things weren't very, very normal.
Now the physical FTE itself, it's been absolutely faultless. It starts on a dime. It has power on tap. The 80 series is so much more smoother, it's so much more refined. It's such a pleasure to drive at the moment. One of the best things we've done for the 80 series by far. It's always been something that I've wanted to work on and make sure the heart of the 80 series is strong and powerful, and that's what she needs, and the rest of the stuff kind of falls in line with that. It's just been absolutely amazing. The great thing about this particular build is, especially with all the components that we've got on the actual FTE, is the fact that on the Unichip we can change the tune on the fly, and I find myself driving on the towing tune. On most days it is my go-to sort of tune. It has power on tap. It's the most sort of, she's very well behaved on the road, put it this way. So if you put it in perspective, if I'm in 5th gear traveling at 65 mile an hour, I can put my foot down in 5th gear and she absolutely rips. The amount of power that this FTE produces right now is just absolutely insane. It's incredible. So I find myself being a little bit more calmer and just running with the towing tune all the time. It is a great thing to have, obviously, on your FTE. If you've got a stock FTE, chuck a Unichip on there, you'll definitely be impressed. And if you have the funds available to do some tuning on the FTE, you'll be thoroughly impressed what this motor can actually produce. Absolutely weapon of a rig.
Was this worth it?
That's a good question. A lot of people ask me, how much money you've sunk into this vehicle and was it worth it? If it's your passion and it's what you do and who you are, 100%. And with the FTE, 1,000,000%. The 1HDT is an absolutely awesome motor, but I just didn't have the same amount of enjoyment from the 80 series that I do now. This is just a whole new level of enjoyment, a whole new level of driving experience, just being able to unlock the full potential, not only of the motor, but of the goat. It's just insane what this truck can do now. So yes, 100% worth it.
What do you still need to do on this goat?
So what's next? Now that we've sorted out the heart of the 80 series, which is a really good question, it's mainly bodywork now. So we're focusing solely on bodywork. We've got a lot of rust to cut out of the some of the body. We have done some work on sort of the rear arches. I've done that behind the scenes. So the rear panels on the rear arches, they're notorious for rusting out here in Europe. So those are the things that we need to tackle. So we've got to cut that out. We basically have to fold all the new steel and all that kind of stuff and do all the body work. So there's quite a little bit of work we need to do there. So the whole rear bar is going to have to come off in that time. But that gives me an opportunity to, do some really good work in those areas. Get that rear bar sent away for powder coating. Just neaten up a couple of things, like the front bar. It could really do with some powder coating. We've got some exposed metal bits and just neaten up the stuff. So I think that is cosmetically, that's what we want to do next, is just work on the cosmetics. We're going to spray the top of the bumper. That's still got its prime on there. That still needs doing. So it's mainly body work at the moment.
Is there still anything that needs upgrading?
Upgrading, I wouldn't say so. I think we've got everything we need. It's mainly the body work. We've got everything we need, particularly from a build perspective. We've got all the cooking, we've got power, we've got 200 watts of solar power, we've got 200 amp hours of power in the back. So there's plenty of stuff there. When we went on a camping trip with the power, we had the fridge on constantly and it never faltered, so which was a great thing. So the other thing that probably would change is the interior. That needs a bit of a freshen up and sprucing up, especially the door cards. What we find is these old MDF door cards, they do sort of hold a little bit of moisture. So I'm looking at upgrading that or changing that from MDF to maybe a sort of a more flexible type of plastic, where I won't have the problem of the MDF rotting out or going soft or anything like that. So I think that's what we want to do, is upgrade those door cards, and then the interior does need a bit of a freshen up, so it'll be quite nice if we can do that.
Once this project is finished, what's your next project that you have in mind?
So that's a good question. We've actually added a new dynamic to the filming. We still have to introduce that. We actually have a overlanding and sort of camping trailer that we've got, and we've been testing and kind of getting the feel for. That is going to need some modifications to accommodate the equipment that we want to take with us on trips and adventures. Some drastic changes we're going to have to make on the particular trailer, and we're also going to update the trailer itself. There's a lot of sort of design features on the trailer that don't really make sense. I think it was a really early design features, and in terms of longevity and practicality of the trailer, it doesn't really make sense. So we'll introduce you to that in the future. It's something that we're going to be working on very shortly, because now that this truck is up to a really good standard or decent standard, we can move on to other projects that will not only complement the builds but complement our trips going away.
Talking about trips, are there any trips coming up in the future that you are kind of looking forward to?
Yeah, so we have a trip planned for next year. So hopefully that is going to take place. So not too sure on exact dates at the moment, but it's going to be a 10-day trip from the UK, all by road, through Europe, through France, Spain, and inevitably we should end up in Portugal. There's a whole bunch of beach driving we want to have and check out on the sort of the west coast of Portugal. There's a whole bunch of sort of sand areas we want to go and explore those areas. Explore the sort of south of Spain, go through the Alps and the Pyrenees and all that kind of stuff between France and Spain, and then make our way back through that way. Not really interested in sitting on a ferry for 27 to 30 hours. I think that is a bit of wasted travel time, and in that you can kind of use that money, offset that cost for the ferry for actually fuel, and then that's what we're going to do, is make a proper trip and actually see the country that all the countries that we're going to be traveling through on that trip. So details will follow. So that concludes the video, the FTE swap. If you guys have any questions on any of the FTE stuff, bear in mind there's quite a lot to take in, especially when you installing a much newer engine into a much older vehicle. There's a lot of things that you've got to make sure that work, mainly the electronics. That is one of those things that you've really got to overcome, and there are some wizards out there who will be able to help you. But again, thank you everybody for all the support, and if you like the video, please hit that thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us, and obviously spread the videos across and share it, gets our name out there. And if you enjoy the videos, and we'll definitely see you guys in the next one.
I have exorcised the demons. This house is clear.